Excellent. Excellent. So, and anybody have any questions about anything before we start? I know, Robert, you have to leave in 45 minutes or something.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll see what we can grab during that time. Anybody have any questions, lingering thoughts, any anything you'd like to ask about before we continue? As we chug along towards the very end of Pirke Avot, and last week we were right in the middle of, well, it wasn't really the middle. It was a teaching that was in chapter 6, and I think in the Chabad website that I provide, I think it's chapter 6, teaching number 6. And so I just want to refresh a little bit of what we covered last week towards the end. It says that the Torah, or any faith, text-based faith, is acquired by 48 virtues, meaning if you wish to be a student of the Torah or the Bible or whatever prime faith texts you have, there are 48 steps or conditions or types of behavior soil from which will emerge soulful spiritual and inner growth. So it's kind of the question of what are these 48 ingredients that you have to put in the soil to make it a spiritual soil from which will emerge even greater spirituality. So, as I said last week, and I'm going to say it again, we don't have time for all 48. That would be a whole course in itself, if you will. But we started out by mentioning a few. For example, one important ingredient in the spiritual soil is a desire for constant learning, that you're never really satisfied to know just what you know, but you're anxious and desirous to know more and more, and you have a thirst for this kind of knowledge. So that's a big ingredient in your soil to create greater spirituality. Another one was, as it's listed, careful listening. What'd you say? I said careful listening. Um, Meaning that you feel that what is said or taught is important enough to pay attention to it and it's relevant. And it means don't be dismissive. Um, don't be dismissive as you listen and say, they're too young, or they're too old, or they're not educated. It means to say, careful listening means to say that everybody's got something to offer at every age and any age, and every experience can teach you something simple or profound. So I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but if I did, it was towards the beginning of our study. When I was in Baltimore, I was the president of the Baltimore Board of Rabbis. It was 54 rabbis, all the way from modern Orthodox to those who rabbi represented humanist Judaism that doesn't believe in God. Okay, it's quite a span. And it's right up there on the first on their homepage. We don't believe in we're cultural, not spiritual. Okay. Um, So at my first meeting with these rabbis, and thank God not all 54 came at the same time, but at my first meeting, I announced that we were going to have the president of Johns Hopkins University is going to address our group. Hey there, Ryan. See you tomorrow, God willing. Yeah, I said next month our first speaker will be the president of Johns Hopkins University. And I remember people saying, what the heck? What's he got to do with us? You know, it's a spiritual group, Johns Hopkins University. Anyway, one of the rabbis had a close relationship with him and called him, and he said he's happy to come. So in the first few minutes of next month's meeting, I see that people are just sitting there kind of, tweeting around the room and looking around. And then I guess he must have said something. Hey there, guy. Good to see you. I
Oh,
guess the president of Johns Hopkins must have said something that caught everybody's attention. And for the next 45 minutes, everybody's writing in their notebook, which was a surprise to me. I thought at least they would be impartial to whatever the meeting is, but no, they're active writing. So I thought of maybe going around and checking to see what they're writing. Maybe it's a shopping list after the meeting. 2 loaves of bread, quart of milk. No, they were taking notes on what he was saying because they found, and this is what I was hoping they would find. They found that a lot of what he said interfaced beautifully with what our mission as rabbis was. And then we had a chance to ask him a lot of questions about the university, Jewish population, anti-Semitism at that time. Thank God that's gone. Anyway, it became a very dynamic kind of a meeting. So that to me is a good example of be careful when you listen and sense that everybody of whatever age, whatever level, everybody's got something to offer you. So you may say, was that worth an hour? I think for many of the people around the table it was. But that to me is a good way to highlight how important it is to just pay attention and see what you can grow and what you can experience from hearing whatever somebody else is talking about. Another ingredient in the soil of spirituality that if you deposit it in the soil, it can grow, is having awe and reverence, having the deepest respect for teachers, mentors, clergy, and scholars, for specialists in a field, for God, His awesome world, the wonders and miracles that we see and experience on a daily basis. So to have awe and reverence for people, specialists, professionals, and for what they know, the knowledge they've amassed, how they apply it, this is another important ingredient in the spiritual soil from which will emerge greater spirituality. And this is pretty much where we got up to last time. So now there's a few more lingering ones. And then after that, we will listen to a story about someone who, well, when we get to that story, I'm going to ask you, how would you respond if you were given that kind um, of a question that we're going to see what the story is all about. But we'll get to that in a few moments. Another ingredient in the soil of spirituality is discussing and debating with others, especially when the other maybe knows more or less than you do. It's not just, the battle of the minds all the time. But in Hebrew, there's a term which is actually an Aramaic term based on the Hebrew. And the term is called chavrusa, or chavruta, if you have the Sephardic pronunciation. And basically, it comes from the word chaver, friend, chaver. Um, and the idea is that people study in pairs, men, women, sometimes men and women together, sometimes only men together, sometimes only women, depending on where you're at. But the idea is to have a chavruta or have a chavrusa with which you study a particular text. And the benefit of that is the discussion and the debate. So I have three. I have three during the week, all different kinds of people. And we have energetic 1 hour, either on Zoom or, in person here in our apartment. Energetic debate, discussion. Yeah, but what about this? But bottom line is, by the end of that hour, each of us knows more than what we came in with. And that's the gold ring, to know more than what you started with. So now I know what I know. Now I know what he knows, and now I know what we know combined, etc. So it's a really for me personally, and for many people, it's a tremendously important ingredient in to deposit in the spiritual soil from which will grow even greater spirituality. And there's another ingredient. There's another few. Being slow to anger is another ingredient. When we're calm and persevering and patience, when we have all that, it enables us to grow um, not only spiritually, but grow in the study of ourself. If you are calm, If you're fidgety, if your mind is very, very busy, a busy highway all the time, and you're always irritable and stuff like that, it's not easy to learn with you as a chavrusa, but it's unsettling. If you're unsettled, you're not going to be able to study the lessons of your faith text. You're not going to be able to incorporate them. And it becomes a barrier to even greater spiritual growth. So being slow to anger, being calm, being patient is a very, very important thing. And being angry, I point this out in some sermons of mine that I used to deliver in my synagogue, that being angry, especially if you're a religious person, whatever that means, if you're angry, sometimes when I used to ride a bus a lot, um, I would notice religious people sitting on the bus with, this kind of which you're entitled to, you're not having a good day, whatever. But at the same time, I would always say that, especially if you're a visibly religious person, whatever that means, that when you sit there unhappy, you may be signaling to other people that you're not satisfied with the way God is running the world. If you hear what I'm saying. So yeah, you're entitled to be any mood you want, No, no, there's no mood police on a bus or a train or a light rail or an airplane, whatever. But I always say to people who are religious, obviously dressed as religious people, that it's very important how you look to the rest of the world, because you don't want to look angry or sour, as if you have problems with the way God runs his world. Now, you may well have problems with the way God runs his world, but if you're going to dress as a religious personality, maybe you shouldn't highlight that on your face. Is that a good point? I don't know. It always seemed to me like a good point, but um, well, when we get to the end of this, I'll ask if anybody has any questions or comments. So that's another important ingredient, and then we'll mention a couple of others. Actually, a few others. Knowing your place. That's another important ingredient to drop in your spiritual soil. Having a sense of your strengths and weaknesses. Having a sense that the pleasures of the world are temporary, while the rewards of how we live in this world, according to our faith text, that is eternal. That's what we carry with us into the next life, God willing. That's what we take with us. Um, And so to have an idea and a strategy of how to complete what is lacking in our lives, lacking in the world, what's lacking out there, and to know your place in the world is very, very important. I may have mentioned over our sessions that there was a very renowned rabbi who passed away a few years ago. He was the expert in addictions, Rabbi Abraham Twersky. He was he was the number one. I don't know if in the Jewish world or in the Jewish world, but he opened up a hospital in Pittsburgh, I think called Gateway, that took in people, any race, color, creed, whatever. If you have an addiction, come to Gateway. And Rabbi Twersky, Hasidically dressed all the time, comes from a long dynasty of Hasidic rabbis, and and he was the expert. He was the no question about it. One time, at least I remember, one time he came to Baltimore, spoke to a group of 400 social workers, etc., community workers in the Jewish community. And then he had a private meeting with just rabbis of the community. So here's a guy who's ready to talk to the rabbis about his expertise, what he knows, how we can deal with teens or adults or families that are dealing with various kinds of addictions. And as he's talking, a rabbi raises his hand, very religious looking rabbi. I don't remember his name. And he says, uh, I know why people get addicted. So in Hungarian, this is my family of origin, Hungarians, both parents, they should rest in peace. Hungarians, have a phrase that when somebody makes a declaration about something outlandish or it's a little catches your attention, you would say about them, oh, they must have founded Spanish wax. Now, I have no idea what that means. So for this rabbi to raise his hand in front of the worldwide expert who studied this and deals with it on a 24-hour basis every day, and he's got a hospital that deals with addictions and addicted people, here comes a rabbi that says, I know why people are addicted. To say that in front of the head of somebody like that, Rabbi Twersky, who clearly knows everything more than all of us combined in that room. It's like, oh, wow, he just founded the Spanish wax, you know. Rabbi Twersky wasn't enough in this room to give us the expertise. You are now going to. Anyway, I so remembered this was 30 years ago. To me, that was an example of not exactly knowing your place. You know, as we're having coffee, tea, Hamantaschen, crumpets, whatever you want after the meeting, you can tell a colleague, you know, here's my thinking on it. But to declare it in front of Mount Rushmore of addictions was, to me, just a little over the line. So it's important to know your place. Another ingredient in the soil of spirituality is to not take full credit for your achievements, but understanding that whatever you achieve, it all comes from above, every bit of it. And whatever you have achieved, God has the biggest share in our accomplishments. And you've earned what you've earned. You should be proud of it, but just know where it came from, by hard work or by grace, and understand the heavenly energy that animates everything that we do. So, um, the Torah has a phrase about this. This is towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses warns through God gives the message through Moses, warns us against feeling that is in Hebrew, ki b'kochi u'b'otzem yadi, asali Hashem et kolela. Everything that I've accomplished, I have done through the strength of my arms and the strength of my character, etc. And Moses warns the people, don't think this way. This is not going to get you anywhere spiritually. To think that you did it and you are the beginning and you're the end of it, as if to say God had nothing to do with it. It was my PhD. It was my expertise. It was my upbringing. It was my wealth, whatever. No, that all comes from above, and it's not yours. You are a steward of it for the moment. That's probably the best we can say. You are a steward of God's gifts for the moment. How do we know it's for the moment? Because in the next moment, it could be gone in a snap. In a snap. And we could probably give our own personal anecdotes about that idea. Um, Last two ingredients that we'll look at, although there are another 40, but no time for that, is this is considered to be a very important value in Judaism, as it must be in other faith traditions as well. Carrying the burden of your friend. To carry the burden of your friend is a very important ingredient in the soil of spirituality. Looking beyond yourself, seeing others and taking note of how we can help them and ease their burdens, feeling their pain. You know, a lot of people made fun of Bill Clinton when he had that phrase, I feel your pain. I feel your. I have a couple of nice pictures with Bill Clinton as well as with Hillary Clinton. Uh, not for now, but yeah, I feel your pain, and people almost ridiculed it, if I remember correctly. Anyway, that's the summary of this particular point. Carrying the burden of your friends, understanding where they're coming from, giving them a little bit of patience to cry with you, put your hands on their shoulders, whatever you need to do, whatever you can do within your capability to help them feel like they're not carrying their burden or challenge alone. That's a very, very important ingredient in the soil of spirituality. And the last one that we're going to discuss is one who repeats a saying in the name of one who said it.
Taking credit. Yeah.
Taking credit. Yep. So in the rabbinic world, I can tell you, and I'm going to guess it's the same with other clergy positions. When you read something really, really like, boy, is this going to transform lives during my next sermon? You just read something and say, oh, wow, this is going to change everybody. That next sermon or homily, this is going to contain this quote, and phew, wow. And there's a part of you that wishes you could just say it as though you thought it. But it wasn't you who thought it, it was somebody else who thought it. But there is a temptation just to pass it along as your own. So this is the last of the 48 traits. One who says something in the name of the one who said it. So what does it mean to say? It means one who quotes something in the name of the person who said it. Don't mislead people by having them think you said it. Don't falsely take credit. Feel indebted to the one who enriched your life with their teaching. Because it's kind of like stealing. And you may say, kind of like, you actually you stole somebody's quote, you know. Um, Teachers would call the students on that. Oh, you presented this as your material. Are you kidding me? I just saw this on whatever, snatchyourpaper.com or whatever kind of websites you can go get a term paper instantly. No, this is not your words. I can tell it's not your words. And you have to feel indebted to the one who said it because you are stealing. And the reward of quoting something in the author's name brings redemption to the world. So I'm going to tell you what that means. I'm going to tell you I don't exactly understand it, but here's what it tries to say. What does it mean it brings redemption to the world? If I heard something really beautiful on this Zoom call and I wrote it down after we're done and I pass it along as my thought, but it really was one of you who said it. So to quote one of you who said it in your name is like bringing redemption to the world. How? And again, I don't fully understand this, but I'll tell you, maybe you do. Maybe you can clarify it for me. What's the connection? So the commentary is exile is a state in which people are displaced. So we call Jewish people in Israel, they are in the first stages of our Geula, first stages of our redemption. And those people who live outside of Israel, we say they are in exile. That's the terminology we would use. They are in exile. In Hebrew, chutz la'aretz, they are outside of the land. And so they are in exile where we are, where we feel Jewish people should feel that they belong. So exile is a state in which people are displaced in both a physical and spiritual sense. So the physical expression of redemption is when people are returned to where they belong. So you would say, so one who returns ideas to their original place by citing them in the name of the author mirrors the redemption process by redeeming the ideas and returning them to their source. By quoting somebody in their name, you're returning and redeeming their ideas back to their source. I don't fully understand that. If you do, I'm happy to hear when we open it up a little bit. So quoting by name gives integrity and honesty and virtue to the one quoting. You're not grabbing the limelight for yourself. You're not passing it along as your material, your inspiration. I heard it from. I heard it from. And by the way, if you've ever studied any piece or page part of the Talmud, it's often the case where it'll say Rabbi Judah said in the name of us, who said in the name of, who said in the name of, who said in the name of. And you ask yourself, who needs this chain? And I think this is what it's talking about, to redeem the idea back to its original source. So there's also a Jewish teaching which seems irrational, that saying something in the name of the one who said it is a great source of merit for that person, even after the source has passed away. So if I'm quoting somebody that has already died, my quote in their name is also assisting them somehow in their spiritual place wherever they are now. So you would say, well, that wasn't what seems irrational about that. The next part is irrational. Tradition has it that their lips move as I'm quoting somebody who has already passed away. Tradition has it that their lips move in the grave when one of their ideas are repeated and quoted in their name. So you ask yourself, is that meant to be taken literally? So, Scott says no. Were we to exhume a body? Let's exhume a body. All right, not a favorite thing of mine. Let's exhume a body and let's quote some things in that person's name and let's see if their lips move. That would be a very practical way of handling it. But I'm imagining it's speaking more figuratively, namely that person, even though they're deceased, is still talking to us. So to me, that's the sense I get of their lips is still moving. Okay. So let's pause here for a couple of moments for any reactions, questions, etc. And then we have this big story that begs the question, what would we do if we were offered the same offer? But let me open it up. If just unmute yourself if you'd like
All
to.
right, here's what I'm gonna say.
You
You're
should say
keeping
it.
them.
Say it.
I will. Good idea. You're keeping them alive. Their memory alive. May their name be their memory be a blessing. You're
Right.
keeping them alive. I
Okay.
think that's what that is referring to when you quote them and give them honor by giving them the tag. You're keeping them alive, and I think that's what that's referring to when it says their mouth is moving even great.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful interpretation. You're keeping them alive. Good. Even though they're gone, we could have forgotten everything they ever said, taught, inspired, but we're keeping them relevant, alive and
Yeah.
relevant.
Also, I think you said when you curtail or you tailcoat on someone's wisdom or anything they're claiming, it's verbal plagiarism. So by just like in any paper you'd write in college, you have to cite your sources.
Yeah,
And if you don't cite your sources, you're guilty of plagiarism. So by honoring someone and giving them back what they said, where you're returning that honor, you're not stealing that blessing of that wisdom. You're giving credit to the person who originally said it, the progenitor of that wisdom. So
beautiful.
that's what I think. So
That was beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Good, good, good. I think I think that's what was intended by these kinds of phrases. Interestingly enough, in the Megillah of Esther that was read yesterday, or today, if you're living in a walled city in Israel, um, when I guess it's Queen Esther, when Queen Esther, uh, no, when Mordecai, he's outside the palace, he's who knows, he probably selling, all kinds of products and Dead Sea products. Mordecai's selling Dead Sea products in front of the palace of the king, and he hears that there's this plot from two people, Bigtan and Teresh. That's their names in the Megillah. They are plotting to kill, poison, whatever. They're plotting to take away the king's life. And he passes it along to Esther, who somehow mentions it in his name. that there's this plot. She mentions it to the people in the palace, quoting Mordecai, that the king's life is ready to be snuffed out because of these two people. And then they act upon it, and then they get hanged. So that's a primary example of how important it is to quote something in the name of the one who said it. Even she did it. She did it. She gave the due honor of this message that Mordecai gave and said it in the name of Mordecai. And how do you like that? That ends up being in the book, that in chapter 6, the book that's read to the king because he can't sleep. Let's see the Chronicles. And all of that was written in the book. Why? Because she quoted in the name of Mordecai. So it's very interesting, very interesting. Any other thoughts about these teachings, these 10 or so teachings about ingredients that are important to drop into the soil of spirituality so that the spirituality has a chance of growing even more? Truth of the matter is, any of these teachings, the 48, can really stand alone as a wow, you know? You really think about it. But yeah, so any other thoughts about this? Ready to go to the story? The story. Um, okay, so this is now uh, chapter 6, Mishnah 9. If you have access to the Chabad teachings, it talks about a Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. Yossi ben Kisma. I just want to mention this, got nothing to do with it, except the names of the two people who were conspiring against the king. In fourth grade, when I was in Providence, Rhode Island, at the Providence Hebrew Day School, all-day day school, Hebrew general subjects, Hebrew subjects, etc. We had a teacher from Israel. It was always important to have at least one teacher from Israel for the year. Give a flavor, Israeli flavor, the Israeli pronunciations, have various activities around the importance of the state of Israel. I remember his name, and not for good, so I'm not going to mention his name. Anyway, it came time that he wanted to put on a play about the Megillah, Queen Esther, Mordecai, Ahasuerus, and he wanted two people to play Bigtan and Teresh. That was their names of the conspirators, Bigtan and Teresh. And so he's looking, I remember this like it happened a second ago. He's looking around the room and he's choosing people. I think he would make a good Esther. I think he would make a good Ahasuerus. I think he would make a good Mordecai, blah, blah, blah. Now we need two people to play Bigtan and Teresh. It's a bit part. 10 chapters of the Megillah. This is a bit part, you know. He's looking around and he says, he looks at me and he says, this was the days where there was uh, no PC in the classroom. So this goes about fourth grade. Yeah, this is 50 blob years ago. I still remember it, and it's still painful. He looks at me and he goes, Big Ton ought to be played by like somebody who looks like a big ton. And at that point in fourth grade, I was a roly-poly matzo ball. Roly-poly. And he says, he keeps on going as if that wasn't enough yet. A big ton ought to be played by somebody who's like fat and round and looks like a big ton. And he points to me and he says, I would like you to be that. I mean, that was not nice. Not nice. Anyway, I mention this because how careful do we have to be with words? I remember this 50 years ago. Not with the same level of pain, but with a certain amount of pain about that. I remember going home telling my parents about that. Here's what, I won't mention his name. Here's what he said. Here's how he chose me. Here's how he described me. My mother flew right through the roof. And the next day she went to the principal's office and complained. And frankly, I don't remember the outcome. I don't think he was fired or anything. But I, I think my mother, she should rest in peace, conveyed the appropriate uh, anger that she felt about her son being singled out in that way. So I say, nowadays you could never get uh, you, you can never get by with saying anything like that to a student. Even if I teach in an all-girls school, even if I was to say to Hannah, for example, sitting in the first row, wow, that's a lovely makeup you have today. Sorry, that would not be that acceptable today. Wow, look at your eyebrows. Wow, I see your clothes are fitting better, which to me would be a compliment. I see your clothes. No way, you cannot get away with this kind of stuff today. So 50 blob years ago, to choose me because I look like a big ton? Wow, not today. And I think we're better for that. Just to be careful how we choose our words. Anyway, thank you for letting me get that off my chest. Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma. We don't know a whole lot about him, but he has this teaching towards the end of the sixth chapter of Pirke Avot that we'll look at now and try to understand. And before we do, I'll ask each of you, if you were in the position of this great sage, what would you answer to the offer given you? So here's what happened. Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma, he was well connected in Roman circles, not to suggest that he was roaming around in circles. This was about, I don't know, 2,000 years ago. He was respected by Jews and Romans alike. He was able to perform miracles and often used them to help his fellow Jewish people. And during the persecutions against the Jews taking place during his lifetime, and you'd say, which lifetime? And I would say any lifetime is when Jews are being persecuted, you know? Um, it's like the old joke about the Ayatollah. He should rest in pieces. Like with the Ayatollah, he goes to a crystal ball reader and says, oh, you're going to die on a Jewish holiday. And he says, which one? And she says, any day you die will be a Jewish holiday. So, exactly when did he live? I'm sure there are educated information about that. Anyway, so he begins to narrate his story. He says there was one time when I was and it's described as a first-person narrative in this Mishnah, in this teaching. He says there was one time when I was walking along the road when a man met me and greeted me. The commentaries, by the way, are quick to point out that Rabbi Yossi was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't even notice somebody coming and approaching him. Meaning, probably had he been aware that somebody is approaching him, he probably would have said hello or greeted him, acknowledged him in some way. But right now, he's just engrossed in his studies, reviewing his studies, whatever he's doing. He's walking along the way. This is how he describes it. And someone says shalom to me. And I return the greeting with shalom. So far, this is not a terribly engaging story. I'm walking, he's walking, I'm walking towards him, he's walking towards me, and we each say shalom. Okay? The man says to me, Rabbi, from which town are you from? And the rabbi's comments say, how did he know the man was talking to a rabbi? How do you know that? Was it his garments? Were they distinctive? Was he carrying a holy book? Did he have a spiritual aura? Some people have a spiritual aura that make them look devout and pious. Hard to know, but Rabbi Yossi continues. He asked me, what town do I live in? And I answered, I come from a great city of sages and scribes. Meaning, I come from a place where my spiritual needs are addressed, supported, satisfied. And there are many just like me where I live. He doesn't say all this, but he means to say all this. There are many just like me. I feel nourished by my colleagues, the other holy people I live with. So far, this is not a very intriguing or interesting or engaging story. Two people meeting each other. What city are you from? Hey, Rabbi. But now a rather benign encounter for so far without a lot of drama or tension. Now comes the crux of this episode as Rabbi Yossi continues. The man said to me, Rabbi, if you are willing to live with us in our place, I will give you thousands upon thousands of gold, coins, and precious stones and pearls. Nice offer. If anybody made that offer to me, I would have to think about it. Honestly, I would have to, give me a couple of days. Wow. So what would you say in hearing such an offer? Uh, Here's Rabbi Yossi, and as a rabbi and teacher, unlikely making a good living. He's just probably eking out a livelihood, maybe barely putting food on the table, struggling to pay the bills. And he's now being offered a position to keep him financially afloat for the rest of his life. So would you negotiate and ultimately accept the offer if all the details aligned with your needs and of your family? So I'll ask that at the end. Here's how Rabbi Yossi responded. This is a grand offer, big. He says, I told the man, even if you were to give me all the silver and gold and pearls and precious stones in the world, I would not live anywhere except in a place of Torah. As King David wrote in Psalms over 3,000 years ago, I prefer the Torah of your mouth to thousands of pieces of gold and silver. Furthermore, when a person departs from this world, neither silver nor gold accompany them. Only the Torah, or your faith text, keeping the commandments, performing good deeds, these are what accompany a person into the next world. So, I ask the question now, but I'll ask it at the end. Would you accept this highly generous offer or reject it as summarily as Rabbi Yossi did? So, before we wrap up this teaching, we may want to investigate why. Why did he turn it down so quickly? A lucrative offer? And here's what some of our commentators suggest. That the man making the offer sounded desperate. I mean, if you're offering a rabbi a position in your community, uh, it sounds a little bit desperate and to find a rabbi for his town. It sounds like maybe he's asked other rabbis and they keep saying no, and he has to keep upping the ante. So now here's a barrel full of gold, silver, precious metals, whatever you need. So maybe Rabbi Yossi detected a sense of desperation. Another commentary says the man said, I will give you all that you need and guarantee your financial stability. And maybe this suggested to Rabbi Yossi that he, the one that made the offer, he took authority as a committee of one to hire a rabbi. He didn't say, we would pay you. He would say, I will pay you. So now he's got to trust the authority and promise of this man without really knowing anything about him, except that he's desperate and wealthy. Is that the kind of a contract you want to sign? Another commentary says the man said, come to our town and live with us, which suggested to Rabbi Yossi, perhaps, it gave him the impression that townspeople were not flexible to leave their town. If you have people who are anxious to have this spirituality, I didn't hear any crumb of an interest in having them leave their town and maybe come to where I am, and that they would remain there. He didn't see any flexibility there. You say Rabbi Yossi didn't exhibit that a lot of flexibility either. But if people are interested in spirituality, maybe they should come to where I live and gain some. But he didn't hear that. And then another commentary says, Rabbi Yossi read something very subtle and likely true in the wording of this magnanimous offer. The man says, come live with us and be, in Hebrew, bimkomenu. Bimkomenu means in our place. Come live with us in our place. but it also carries the sense of instead of us. Come be with us instead of us. What does that mean? What did Rabbi Yossi discern by that subtlety in language? That instead of us, the town people may have wanted a professional Jew, any rabbi, to come and be the professional Jew, the one who performs all the rituals. You perform all the prayers. You do you do the rituals. You do the studying. You do the traditions, not with them, but instead of them. Your great scholarship will give us the prestige that we need, and you do all the Jewy things instead of us, because we're indicated we're not particularly that interested. You be the Jew, and we'll be the as we were always. But we need somebody to give us some sense of prestige. So one could say, hey, Rabbi Yossi, maybe you should have accepted and could have changed people's lives dramatically, spiritually. You never know. Accept the offer, go to that community and work your ways. Truth of the matter is, not every clergy person is good at working their ways in that way. I can teach, I can inspire. I don't know. Can I change lives? I don't know. Um, can I transform lives? I don't know. But I'm a good teacher, I'm a good scholar. I can give a good class, whatever. So maybe he should have accepted all those riches and set up something in that community like Chabad. That's what Chabad does. They go to the weirdest places in the world, where there's what, 5 Jews, 3, 0. And they establish themselves, build programs, attract people, and before you know it, there's a whole community that is drawn to their teachings and their approach. So maybe he made the wrong choice. He should have just accepted and done something in that community. On the other hand, one could argue that Rabbi Yossi made the right decision, because how could he maintain his own spirituality all alone? Until he turns on the next person, he'd be all alone. How long could he be the only one doing Jewish before his soul begins to atrophy? So I'm imagining that for Rabbi Yossi, his response did not need a lot of thinking or consideration or weighing pros and cons. I'll get back to you in a couple of days. His response was swift, crisp, unwavering. He said no, period, full stop. Rabbi Yossi, is that your final answer? Yes, absolutely. I don't want the job. And he knew by what had transpired with the gentleman that he would be a fish out of water in this town that appears to be devoid of any interest in spiritual growth. Nice house? Yeah. Guaranteed salary? Yep. All kinds of perks? Yep. Suffocating by moving there? Yep. So to have your soul die in the wilderness was not worth all the money in the world. Anyway, so now I ask you, in our waiting moments, I ask you, what would you have done? Did he do the right thing, wrong thing? Did he give up a possible whole generation of future by not going to that town? What are your thoughts?
I think Rebbe Yosef, I think he made the right decision. And first off, before I get into why I think that, I can't help but to notice that this reminds me of a couple of chapters ago in Pirke Avot, when it talked about the two standpoints of study the same thing until you die or try new things and move on.
Right.
So to me, this would kind of tie into that, whether he would stay in the area where he is, or he would go to this place and try something new. So to me, in my mind, it kind of relates to that.
Interesting. It's an interesting insight. Yeah. It's like an echo of that.
But the reason why I think Rebbe Yosef made the right decision is because he made a choice to choose something that transcends tangible values or physical monetary values. He chose something that's I feel like it's more of a spiritual. It kind of speaks to your soul, where he comes from. He's already satisfied. He was there. Obviously, if he wasn't satisfied, maybe he would have already left. maybe it wouldn't be such a hard I'm sorry, it's Purim here, and these kids are loud out here behind me. So
No
um,
problem. Great.
all I hear is I'm in a coffee shop right now. All I hear is I can't hear you. I hear sirens. There's an ambulance going down the
Oh,
opposite
really?
street.
Oh, wow.
But
Which
but that's kind
which
of my 2 cents.
which coffee shop are you in?
I'm in Power Coffee. It's Stephanie Traeger
Yeah,
and
yeah,
her husband.
yeah.
You know her. You know
I don't
her.
know her well, but from Efrat.
Small world because I didn't know that when I came here.
Yeah.
So, but no, that's just kind of my 2 cents. I would have taken the same deal as Rabbi Joseph would have said.
Okay. John, what would you have done? You think he made the right
I agree.
decision? Did he go too
I agree
quickly?
with
Did he give
Ryan.
it some thought?
Well, there's a lot hidden in there, but one, he saw red flags. Um, I think it speaks volumes to me when he says that, how is it worded? That I would not dwell anywhere but in a place of Torah. So it just goes to show you that that place was void of Torah at the moment, So, and your money doesn't mean everything, right? So just reminds me of times in my life and career, even when I've passed over opportunities that could have been more financially rewarding for more time with my family, or whatever the case may be. Um, so he had to weigh those, and the money was not that important.
Mhm. Yeah, this balance game is not always simple. How do you and both of you referred to this idea of balance, scholarship now, scholarship later. Should you be where you are? Should you go to another place? And yeah, there's not a Guy, would you like to add to the conversation about what you might do, what you might have decided? Okay. Yeah. So I often ask myself that I've taught this particular Mishnah, this particular teaching many, many times. And I often ask myself, okay, Elon, what would you do? Big talker. What would you do? The teaching is not going to give us every facet of every detail that happened there and whatever. It just gives you the highlights, so to speak. I think I would have wanted to take some time and just to try to ask some people. He made a lot of assumptions which could have all been accurate. It's devoid of Torah, nobody's interested, etc., etc. I might have taken a little bit of time and just surveyed. What do I know about the people there? Am I right by what I'm thinking about them? Um, and personally, I always felt that a rabbi or any clergyman, any clergy person, uh, has some obligation to not just hold themselves up in a place where they're comfortable and at home, but part of their mission is, as we would say in Hebrew, like one of the Torah portions in Genesis, Lech Lecha, go forward. So there's great benefit to being where you are very spiritually comfortable. And there's got to be also great benefit to being in a place that's very challenging to you. And what are you going to learn from that challenge, and how do you rise to that challenge? So I often feel ambivalent about Rabbi Yossi. I understand it, but I also feel that maybe he gave up a real opportunity to create something by checking out a little bit more and saying, are my assumptions correct? If they are, maybe I really don't want any part of it. And then, of course, there's the aspect of what does that new environment do to you? You know? So these are very, very heavy considerations.
One other
Hey,
comment,
yeah, go ahead.
just a thought that hit me is, to add another little piece to it is, sometimes clergy is even down upon in a way of those that are chasing money.
Oh,
Chase,
yeah.
so who knows if that could have played into it. Like, I don't want to be the guy that looks like I'm just going after this position because of the reward, right?
Right. Right.
And just the looks of that.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to appear as somebody who's just taken advantage and ready to get rich. He was probably like me. I remember mentioning to you, I'm the world's lousiest fundraiser. He probably was not even a good fundraiser. The truth is, maybe he didn't even have the people skills to transform anybody or anything except himself. Not every clergy person has the speaking skills, etc., to stand in front of a group and say something that can change a life. You don't always have to change life, but transform life in some even little way. Not everybody has that gift. And it's important when you recognize that you do or you don't have it. The former chief rabbi of Efrat, Rabbi Riskin, had it in wheelbarrows as a speaker, scholar, influencer. Wow. And there are many, many like that. And there are many that sometimes I listen to and I say, maybe they should stay in, they should have stayed in the study hall because that's really more their place. But I think I mentioned earlier on that Yeshiva University, where I went to for my rabbinic studies, and tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of my receiving a rabbinic ordination. So I'm very excited about it. I take note of it every year. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. So why wasn't I mentioning? Yeah. They sponsor through the largesse of a Mexican donor, New Mexico, who I think is not living anymore, but he gave Yeshiva University a lot of money to attract great scholars who are going to become greater scholars. That was very important to him. And then he realized that all of these great scholars, budding and otherwise, sitting holed up in a study hall, it serves some purpose, but it could serve a bigger purpose by having those people now go out and teach what they're learning. And he made that the new stipulation of continuing his funding. That I want these students to go out and teach. So it's in New York. I mean, there's no shortage of places they could have gone out to. They didn't have to fly to, San Jose and go to Brooklyn, Queens, whatever. But that became the stipulation of him continuing his funding, that they not only lilmod, which means to learn, but lilamed. They've got to get out there and teach. And all of a sudden, all kinds of schedules were taped up on the walls of Yeshiva University. These are the students who will be speaking in the following places on the following topic. Here's the time. Here's the free, 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 free. And for him, that actualized the real purpose of his donation, of his contribution, is to people to learn and be immersed. But you've got to complete that by getting out there and teaching and moving others. Otherwise, it's you guys will be great and wiser, but nobody else will. So I thought it was a very important stipulation that he made. I have no idea where the status of any of that is now because I've been out of there for 40 years. You may be seated. Yeah. So, okay. So here's where we are. When I, I'm sure I mentioned this in the earlier classes. Months and months ago, a foundation paid for Israel 365 to gather 10 scholars. Okay, they overdid it with me. To gather 10 scholars and to record 45 half-hour videos on a topic. So I recorded 45 half-hour videos on the topic of Pirke Avot. And interestingly enough, my son-in-law works at Israel 365. He's the video guy. And I went in several times to record 5, 6, 7 lessons at a time. And he was opposite the camera, getting me coffee. Couldn't have been a sweeter situation than have my son-in-law is in charge of all this. uh, nice meals from Japan. Anyway, it was a lovely. So I ended those 45 half-hour videos with this lesson of Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma. So what I've noticed is I've run out of notes, but I'm on page 161 and I'm done. But there's a lot more in chapter 6 that I glossed over for that series because I had to chop it up into 45. And that would have made it like 55 or whatever. So now I'm going to go back and retrieve many of the lessons that I didn't go over with you or with that whoever's watching those things now. No idea. I have no access to them. They were given over to some foundation. So now for the next several weeks until Passover, I will be very excited to look at material that we didn't cover and to share that with you in the future weeks. So that's fun. That's fun. Anyway, any closing comments, thoughts, reactions, anecdotes, blessings? John, you looked really good in your Purim garb.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was fun.
It was a
That
lot
was
of
a
fun.
good one. That was a good one. Yeah. And Ryan, we look forward to seeing you and Cade tomorrow.
Absolutely. I'm excited. We're excited.
Beautiful. We're excited too.
Awesome.
We have some nice guests for Shabbat meals. Very, very nice. So good. All right. So let me wish you to be happy, healthy, and safe. Um, and Shabbat Shalom when it happens in a couple of days, God willing. I always appreciate your being together with us and your interest. Always, always. So you just
Thank
take care.
you.
Shalom, everybody. And let's
All
keep
right,
celebrating and let's hope for total victory
there you go.
for
Amen.
us, for America, and for the free world. It's looking to
Right.
get rid of tyranny and evil.
Amen.
Thank
All
you.
right. Be well. Bye bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Take care.